So hello and welcome to our Shared Mobility 2020 Organisations webinar. So my name is Jacob Gregg and I lead Liftango's North American division, driving our mission to unlock all the good that comes from shared mobility. This episode is the second in a four-part series, inspired by what is proving to be one of the most disruptive years in recent memory. On one hand, people around the world are facing the horrors of Covid-19, and at the same time, a global civil rights movement is pointing the way to a brighter future for us all. It is definitely a time of great uncertainty, pain, and potential. Over the past few months, Covid-19 has impacted almost every aspect of life. And for the mobility sector, the impact has been really severe. Transit ridership is down and driver loan rates are up. This trend is pretty alarming as it's going against everything that we've been trying to work for. Cities globally have spent the past few years trying to reduce traffic congestion and emissions by encouraging people to shift away from driving alone. The challenge now is to enable the safe movement of people whilst avoiding a shift back to cities filled with cars. So to explore this topic, I'm joined by a pretty incredible panel of global mobility gurus, each coming from some amazing organisations that have been facing different challenges. So let's meet our panel. Michelle.
Super. Hey, so Michelle Sidio, Global Meeting and Travel Manager for IKEA. And I think you hit it spot on right now. The safety, security, and well-being of our employees or coworkers, as we refer to them, is of utmost importance. So it's not just like transient travel anymore. It's even from home, to the office, and everywhere in between. So super happy to join.
Thanks, Michelle. And Melvin?
Yeah, hi, Melvin Justice, Senior Transportation Project Manager here at Tesla Transportation. Yep, one of the biggest things for our outfit, and I think across multiple outfits, is what I call COVID compliant, making sure that our health and safety is the most paramount thing, whether it be in your own car or in one of our modes.
Right. Thanks for joining us, Melvin. And we've got Alex from Smart Columbus.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Jacob. Alex Slaymaker with Smart Columbus. For the last 2 years, I've worked at Smart Columbus, transforming how employees commute, so inspiring them to drive less or drive electric. Shout out to Tesla. So it's been a really, really fun journey, but increasingly challenging because of everything going on. So I'm really excited for the conversation today because I think we're all still looking for answers. I don't think anyone has all the answers, so hoping to learn from the other panelists as well. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And Esteban?
Hey, glad to be here as well. Esteban, I'm co-founder and chief technical officer at Commutify. And we're a data-driven company helping enterprises, cities better understand commuting data so that we can hopefully push towards a more sustainable commuting.
Excellent. And lastly, Bobby.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to see some friendly faces on here. Bobby Lauderyoung, co-founder and executive director of Beeline Mobility, which is a full scope commute solutions provider based in Seattle. And we're also a shuttle operator. So we have over 25 years of shuttle operating experience. And right now we're specifically working with organizations to understand how we can help them strategize and draft their return to work site plans. So we're actively involved in understanding how we can use data to plan effectively given the current climate. So anyway, Jacob, thanks for throwing this together. We're excited to be here.
Great, thanks. What a panel. So looking forward to the discussion. So, looking back over what has been a crazy 3 to 6 months, what's been some of the impacts for your people? What have you seen change?
Because of course we are a customer service-based organization, meeting the customer in the right way is important. So for us, it's been about, finding that mix and that balance, making sure everyone is, again, safe and secure and that their health and well-being is of utmost importance. But it's been interesting because it's propelled us into thinking, dare I say, like in an agile way. And for a legacy organization, sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow. But the innovation and the creation that we've actually seen within the org has been actually super inspiring. My personal experience with my friends and family back at home, their reality is much different than my reality sitting here in Sweden, right or wrong. And then of course, every country, and then even within those countries, so the US, like state by state, there are differences. So it's about trying to find, I think, consistency where and when, but then also understanding that there are very locally specific things that we need to adhere and address. And then again, I think it's also a personal thing, because even if it might be okay, you know, to go into work or to make that journey, if someone doesn't feel okay, we don't want to force that upon them either. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
And Melvin, I might turn to you, because my mind boggles that you're in a company that's growing at unspeakable rates. You know, is quickly emerging as the world's largest automaker, and you've got COVID to deal with. How has it been for you? You know, what's been the experiences and the challenges and changes for your people?
I think what we've been able to do is two things. Number one, we've been able to understand, really look at how the world's reacting, and then be able to say, well, do we have any pieces of our chain available that we can leverage? And so we did Tesla Shanghai, good example, right? That was the first epicenter, and it went in waves, you know, east to west, really, right? So using Tesla Shanghai, we said, hey, how can we emulate any kind of measures from a COVID compliant lens to then emulate and bring over to, let's say, a Tesla in Nevada, right? One of our huge factories. And so let's try and migrate that over to Western civilization, as they call it, to see what works and what doesn't, right? What's possible, and then what's working and what's not. Obviously, we have sales, service, delivery centers. We have factories. We've got so many different outfits of different types that that are very integral to our operation. Obviously, production being the main one. So, with that being said, how do people get to work? When they get to work, how are they compliant at work? So, you know, with so many people, we were able to essentially lay a roadmap with some small breadcrumbs to start, and then really kind of turn it up as we saw some of the proven process, especially in Shanghai, work very well in a very dense environment that does not have a huge footprint, and then basically mimic that across most of our sites with some tweaks based off of local governance.
Yeah, I think one of the main themes is that people actually don't want to return back to the workplace, in terms of a lot of folks, not everyone, but many people actually like working from home, or at least having that option. I think that's one of the biggest trends we're going to see from COVID-19 in the workplace. But this will obviously have a pretty big impact on transportation as well. And I think it might open up more opportunities for people with, you know, diverse life situations. Maybe they take care of an older relative or someone who's sick and they can't get a full-time job in person somewhere. Well, maybe they can work now, and maybe that adds a lot of value to their lives. So I think there's a lot of those kind of secondary benefits as well that we'll see in communities across the US, since that's my perspective. But I'd say kind of another interesting trend is a renewed focus on the building materials we use, so how we design our office spaces. So if you're going back to the workplace, how can we think differently about how those spaces are designed? So we have high-tech ventilation systems, we have ample natural light, you know, to make sure people feel healthy and safe in those environments. We know those types of strategies can actually decrease the transmission of viruses in office spaces, but that's not something a lot of companies prioritize before this, right? When they have a limited budget and can't do everything under the sun. So I think that's going to be a trend we see really stick, at least for a while.
First of all, I really agree with Alex that, you know, despite how terrible recent events have been, there are some really promising silver linings, one of which being that not only has telework been proven, but all flex work options have been proven. It's more about, I think we need to move into this next phase in TDM of understanding how to formalize those programs, understanding how to qualify which employees or even departments or teams are eligible for those sorts of programs or best suited for those programs, provide the guidance, but then also understand on more of a micro level what sorts of hardware, software, communication support and resources are needed for each.
Yeah, it's been interesting since we've been working with these cities, with these employers, with these real estate providers. And We've been with their platform, we've been providing them all of this data. And what we've seen with COVID is actually an increased desire to either get this data or use the power of this data. Like when we listen to what Melvin, Michelle, and Alex described, these situations are so complex. I mean, IKEA have 32 countries, 160,000 employees. How do you quickly react to events if you're using, let's say, spreadsheets, and if you don't know what's happening? And that's why we've seen a very big increase on having actionable data that you can understand. And if it was not for this event, at least for future events, that you can be ready. You can, if you want to know right away, so which employees need to be at the office, how can they commute, what service do I need to offer them, what service can I cut? Having actionable data helps do that quickly. And we've seen it with a few of our clients who have been able, by example, to quickly cut tens of thousands of dollars of parking expense, by example, just by knowing exactly what they can cut, what service do they need to keep, and have this actionable data to move fast on that. So we actually ran a national survey on all our users, and we found that over 50% of employees would like to keep working at home at least twice a week. And only 25% want to fully return to the office. So when you take these numbers, and that you know in parallel from studies that almost 1 out of 4 employees left that job because of a bad commute, we see quickly how employers need to handle that data and need to provide solutions that will fix this. We can't simply shift from having comfortably work at home every day to go back an hour in traffic. People won't take it.
A whole new set of challenges now, I'd imagine. So what are you seeing now as some of the challenges you're having to face into with people returning back to work?
So, you know, we have, again, that mix of people, some that are actually wanting to go into the office, or some that actually have to be, you know, in the physical location, you know, to service the customers, to keep the lights on, whatever. And so how do we also then mitigate that commute time? Because, I mean, they're committing and they're coming in. You know, they want to be there, they want to show up, which is fantastic. But again, you have to watch out for their well-being. And I think Alex kind of tied to what you're saying, you know, like psychological safety, you know, in your workplace, feeling confident and secure, both in the physical and emotional sides of the house are super important. So for us, it's about finding like alternative ways to support those that need to come in. And then again, back to this whole remote working thing, like IKEA, it is probably not known to be a very agile organization. And of course, in my past life, I've worked for a lot of tech companies that are very agile and, you know, very much in the learning as you go mode. IKEA historically is a very planned and prepared company, and just the energy that I've seen around this innovation and this opportunity to really just take like the things that matter most and just go. So we're actually, you know, addressing things has been really, really great. So
all of our facilities you walk into, every last one of them has digital temp scanners. You can literally walk in, it's like you're walking into TSA, meaning you walk right through, you can see your face on a screen. If you're red, it'll pop up. We have iPads that literally you can put your face right in the actual cutout of it. It's the shape of a face. You stick your face in, it'll read you right there. We have a bunch of different PPE setups at every one of our locations, no matter where you walk into. And then the more important thing is that when it comes to desks, we were able to say, hold on a second, how are you going to get admin folks back in here, right? How are you going to get them to work, number one? And then when they're at work, how are they comfortable? How are they going to eat? All these different things matter. So we went on an alternate schedule, right? That's the first thing we did. We said, hey, hold on a second. Can we do like an AC, you know, an A and C, maybe Monday, Wednesday, and then maybe this group goes Tuesday, Thursday, right? We separate desks. Some of the desks have, you know, I would say things that you can't move, right? Things that are specific to the work lay of individuals, right? Meaning that this guy has to have this at his desk. You can't just share it. So we've walked through immense challenges. We've had some scares. We've had some wins. Most of it is trial and error, but we've been able to get our admin even back in the house now because of this exact kind of mindset. And then how do we manage it internally? We even have sensors now. We have sensors on floors that'll tell you if you're too close. And we have a playbook right online that you guys can all look at. If you put in Tesla Workplace Playbook, you can literally Google that. There's a full, I think, 36-page playbook we put out like a couple months ago because we were ahead of the game on a lot of this stuff. We doubled down on our van pools, making them all COVID compliant. What have we done there? 50% capacity. We'll even give you an extra van to make sure that everyone has a row to themselves, which is 6 feet, and like a Ford Transit, a good example. Second thing we did was we gave everyone PPE kits that you can refresh on. The third thing we did was we give people free reimbursement for van pool cleaning. So a great thing we did was, hey, enterprise, we'd like to work with you to maybe use your rental car outfits to go clean our vans, right? You got a bunch of people there. Why don't we just schedule it, right? Simple, easy math. So things like that. And then for our carpooling program, masks are required. If someone doesn't have a mask on, we'll actually give you the ride, an Uber Lyft, no problem at all. And even then, that's still kind of a challenge, right? Biking, we're doing $15 a day to bike. Imagine that. You get paid $15 a day to bike to work because we're doubling down to ensure people are like, you know what? Biking's a craze. Let's jump it. Let's go ahead and knock this out. We'll open up some shared biking. We'll do some other things, but we made our bike cages COVID compliant. And then I think last but not least, our shuttles, right? Half capacity. We've got sneeze guards on every row. We've got temp scanners on buses now where you can literally walk up to an iPad. So, I mean, we've got a lot of great things of that nature. We have, at every one of our shuttle stops, we have a CSR reps and full teams that'll provide sanitizer, masks, they'll have gloves, they'll have everything there. So really at the end of the day, we've taken a lot of steps and we're still basically sharpening up this.
The shared and active mobility movement has made so much progress in the last decade, and there's really no sugarcoating it. I'd say COVID-19 has been a massive blow to shared mobility, and transit has taken a big hit. Melvin hit on it. It's kind of a no-brainer at this point, and their operators are really on the front lines. But our transit provider in Columbus, CODA, is truly leading. I'm really proud to say. They're offering free service and rear loading to protect the operators. When I say rear loading, like the rear doors, the front doors are closed, so people aren't getting too close to the operators, which is cool. And they did that super early on. They're limiting the number of people out on the bus at any given time. And they, of course, deployed best practice cleaning protocols and require people to wear masks and everything like that. They even partnered with some local organizations to distribute masks to residents who might not have access or things like that. So that was really cool to see as well. I think a big question right now is just how do we help people feel safe, when they're carpooling and using transit? How do we help them effectively social distance? When you can only have 2 people per van, you really start to have a problem for a company if they're like subsidizing or supporting that service. It can get pretty costly. So kudos to Tesla for leaning into that and doing it anyway. I think that's really cool, really important. But some companies can't, or aren't for whatever reasons. And I think we definitely need to elevate those companies that are leading on that.
But yeah, from our national surveys and the data that we've collected, we've seen a real fear for public transit and carpool and van pool. Our data actually shows that only 23% of employees are comfortable right now with public transit, and only 26% are comfortable with carpool and van pool. And this is from data we've collected with various customers around mostly the United States. So it's less global, mostly focused North America. But as we're looking at this data, it's not only a question of what assets are available and if buses are running again, it's also, again, what's the individual reality of each of these employees, what are they willing to do, but also, as Alex mentioned around scenarios, I think that's really important because when we think of the global, we not only have people commuting in certain distance, but there's employees that bring their kids to school on their way to work, so they might need a vehicle for that. There's employees who are not able physically to bike to work, other employees who have other commitments, and there's all these reality that we need to look into.
Looking forward, talked about the challenges, what's changed, what are you doing? What are some of the key things that you're doing now over the next sort of 6 to 12 months to help people returning to work?
Like we're selling kitchens virtually now via conference calls. So we're using technology to do those same things, right? So we're still meeting the customer, but in many different ways. So I think for us, it's going to be about how can we actually uplift our workforce and give them options, right, that fit their personal preferences. Maybe it's their health preferences, maybe it's their safety and security, ideals. So one, I think it's about just looking at it from a more flexible approach. when it comes to work itself. And then I think it's also the transformation of our workplaces, right? So these fixed locations that we have, so making them safe and secure, ensuring things like social distancing and best practices are actually applicable, and ever changing and evolving as things continue to ever change and evolve in this space.
I think, one of the things that I think Alex, right, was talking about the data. I think the data supports the fear. I don't think it supports the actual mean. What I mean by that is, good example, we have over 200 van pools. I got 20 van pools I'm going to start next month that are brand new. So what we did was we created an environment that was safe so that people can adopt, right? So I think one of the things that people are going to start to understand, and I think Michelle hit the nail on the head here, is that, hey, for some of us, we can adapt and make a move. For some of us, we just can't. Some of these folks, they got to come in. So I think what's going to have to happen is recruiting starts to take a change as environments start to change, as rules and regulations, right? This boomerang ebb and flow of, now we got to restrict everything. Now we can't. I can't travel. You can. I think folks are going to start to say, we see so many dominoes falling in different ways. We need to basically just hone in and figure out what makes sense to us. We need to make a move. We can't keep waiting for like a stagnant approach to happen, because business is still
frequent, data-driven, honest, science-based, easy to understand communications from leadership and managers consistently is key for workers to feel safe, for them to feel like they know what's going on, for them to really feel in tune with the organization. I've heard a lot of our partners are having their CEOs actually host weekly podcasts, so they can have that voice and their employees can feel connected to them and their thinking as it evolves, because it evolves hourly and daily for sure. Also want to double click on using some data, real-time data, whether it's Commutify, surveys, listening sessions, whatever the method is to collect that data, using that to inform that communication is super important. We don't want communications coming out that aren't based in anything, right? That aren't based in reality and the current moment. So just wanted to reiterate that for a minute. And I'll also say some employers are leaning into providing mobility benefits in the form of incentives or passes for commuter bikes and e-scooters. Sounds like Tesla's doing some of that, which is phenomenal. But for some industries, if they're not financially healthy enough to feel like they can provide something that's incentivized or supported financially by the organization, they can still promote the concept of biking, walking, carpooling with close coworkers or family members in advance of returning to the workplace. So even if they say, hey, we can't invest anything in this, which to Melvin's point, is probably not a good idea because you might have some turnover, right? You have to retrain, which is a big cost in the future. So probably not a good idea, but if that's your situation, you can still be engaged in this conversation and still make sure your employees are informed about how they can get to work in a safe, sustainable way.
We see a lot of companies right now who are first focused on, I think, everything that's first bike programs, walk program, active commuting. Anything that you can incentivize active commuting has been very popular recently. And this goes from bike share subsidies to even we've seen companies helping have programs to maybe buy electric bikes and or subsidize rental of electric bikes for employees. So anything that's active commuting is for sure a big thing, but also anything that can get people away from parking. And if you think of parking cash out, which have been popular for a while, we're seeing a bigger need for parking cash out now. As always, what's great, as Alex mentioned, not everyone have the means to pay for incentives. But for companies at least that are already providing parking, and when there's a cost associated with these parking, we've seen actually the ability to generate savings out of parking cash out while offering, let's say, offering $100 a month for flexible mobility to anyone who doesn't drive. So yes, so we've seen a big shift in how these incentives are being allocated. A few things we've done at Commutify is first, we've actually released a white paper and started offering employers a free baseline analysis on commuting and helping employers understand what's their current status of commuting and what are the impact of different programs. So we've been offering that for free to help return to work, but also we've been working with these employers on, as you're creating these plans, how do you first relocate your employees if, let's say, you have multiple offices? How do you distribute your employees in the optimal way, considering the new also regulations around like office attendance? You can have, let's say, 6 feet, you need to be 6 feet apart, or you can have that many people per square feet. So how do you deal with not only transportation, but this reduced capacity at office? And how do you align that with transportation? So these are things we've been doing with real-time data and that employers should be thinking about.
Yeah, so complete this sentence basically. 2020 will be the year that shared mobility something. So if you can say what you think it'll be the year for shared mobility.
2020 is going to be the year that mobility sheds its skin and evolves, in my opinion. I think that there's a lot of really fantastic things happening amidst all the chaos. Personally, I am a fan of the lowest carbon footprint commute modes. And so I'm a huge fan of not just telework, but flex work personally. And this is coming from somebody that is a shuttle provider, you know? And so we would rather see folks that can work from home continue to work from home, because that's more environmentally conscious, because we really believe that that can increase productivity, again, for the teams that are eligible, that it makes sense for things of that nature. But I think that there's some really good things happening in the way of the flex work being, something that's really evolving. I really like the COVID reservation systems that Jacob, you and I have worked on, to make sure that we can maintain social distancing on board. That's a huge evolution given recent events. And then I think that, back to data, a lot of what Esteban was talking about, a lot of what Melvin mentioned is that the data is really imperative and just crucial, king even in driving decision making. And so I think if some of these characteristics that are evolving and required for us to be able to complete the gig right now, is something that I would hope is sustained in our actions beyond 2020. So 2020 is the year that mobility is going to shed its skin.
I think 2020 is going to be the year shared mobility reaches its peak, actually. And I don't know if that's going to be public transit, but I think we've seen the advent of biking start to really, I don't think I've ever seen biking. I've biked all my life, and I don't ever seen biking at this height. And I don't think that's going to stop. I think we're going to also see some other avenues of similar interests, meaning the behavioral change towards shared mobility will adapt to something a little bit more, I would say, applicable to folks, whether that be virtual, as you guys have talked about. Does that equate people taking shorter trips with a bike, with a scooter, with something like that to get them around? Or B, do we look at any long hauls like a van pool, maybe like a shuttle needed privately, to where you may see more shared private interests, saying, hey, IKEA, I'd rather share with you, and you have a small folks, I have a small faction, we don't have enough money, but maybe we can get together, and guess what, we are aligned on the COVID compliant protocols, we are aligned on the mission. I think that's what you're going to see more of as companies want to turn it back on, but they don't want to have to pay, and they also don't want to have to lose workers.
I think that shared mobility delivers change. I think there's been a boiling point, and it's kind of tipped the scale at this point in time. So for me, I'm also, I think, riding Melvin's wavelength of enthusiasm in the fact that this dialogue, this narrative, that has been very prevalent, of course, where I work in my organization, to maybe a few or a sub-select group of people. So maybe our group sustainability, my group that deals with, mobility and people, and I sit in people and culture, so HR, right? So our area, we're always talking about this, but I think 2020 is the year that this narrative, this story actually becomes tangible and relevant for everybody.
I'd say 2020 is the year of micro mobility and a renewed focus on equity. I think it's important to remember that mobility has a long history of perpetuating inequities and white supremacy. I mean, specifically when you're thinking about the United States. And mobility innovation is about more than fossil fuel free mobility. Clean and shared mobility aren't, inherently equitable. And so we have to make that a priority in 2020 and 2021 and forever, to make sure that's always top of mind as people who are designing programs for employees, and generally, building a better future and better community. So I think 2020, year of micromobility and renewed focus on equity.
So I think 2020 is the year of sustainable and resilient mobility. It's just, I think we realize that there's other crises coming around. For the sustainability aspect, if we don't improve on that end, and we need to start thinking of our people first. How do we put in a transportation system the actual people that need to move? How do we put their well-being ahead of financial decisions, but also in a way that makes sense for companies, for cities, and for communities as a whole? So I think it goes towards building a sustainable and resilient transportation ecosystem.
I think 2020 will be the year that shared and micro mobility moves from being a should to a must. I think that will be the big change.